Unfortunately, for as influential and important as Devil May Cry was, the team behind the game never actually got to make a follow-up. Instead, Capcom very quietly started development of a sequel without ever alerting Hideki Kamiya. This, naturally, resulted in the infamous Devil May Cry 2, a game so bad that some fans still refuse to acknowledge it. Interestingly, Team Little Devil would regroup years later as Team Little Angel in order to work on the first Bayonetta. In many respects, this makes Bayonetta a spiritual sequel of sorts to the first Devil May Cry. If nothing else, it's certainly the better of the two DMC1 follow-ups. Given that Devil May Cry began life as Resident Evil 4, many fans simply assume that this meant that Dante was originally Leon. In truth, the game that was Resident Evil 4 would have focused on a character named Tony Redgrave, an invincible man with a strange body that allowed him to pull off superhuman feats. With the shift from RE4 to DMC1, Tony Redgrave became Dante's alias. Interestingly, while the game itself doesn't focus on Dante's perceived invincibility, it's still very much a part of his character. It's also for the best that Kamiya ultimately chose not to shine any light on this aspect of Dante's character. At first glance, Sparta, the sword, not the man, kind of blows. Dante can't use his devil trigger and Sparta seems to play like a worse version of Alaster, Dante's most useful weapon in the game. Unfortunately, this is a case of Devil May Cry failing to convey information properly. Sparta isn't worse than Alaster by any means. In fact, on hard, and Dante must die, it's undeniably the best weapon available. On DMD, Devil Trigger no longer heals Dante, so there's no real reason to trigger it outside of the most desperate of moments. Better yet, Dante doesn't even need Devil Trigger. Sparta is as strong as Alaster in its DT form without the need of transforming. That's pretty damn useful. According to Hideki Kamiya himself, there was never anything romantic between Dante and Trish. Which only makes sense considering Trish is a demonic clone of Dante's mother. At the same time, the game's musical score very much presents this idea that Dante and Trish are romantically involved. It's impossible to ignore track titles like I'm Coming, Blue Orgasm, and the ever so subtle Dante and Trish Seeds of Love. That last one specifically is the game's staff role, but the first two tracks specifically play during the game's final escape sequence where Dante works together with Trish. Here's hoping that Pillow Talk isn't referencing Dante and Trish post-game. Well, kind of. Every single Devil May Cry game, with perhaps the exception of DMC4, embraces a gothic horror aesthetic, but DMC 2 through 5, the reboot included, never go beyond using horror as a visual style. Which is fine, the games don't need that, but it's worth noting just how well the first game uses its horror. It's genuinely scary at times, using its fixed camera in order to create both tension and atmosphere. Dante is far more capable than any re-protagonist before him, so it's not as if the character himself should be scared, but DMC1 actually uses this to amplify the terror in some areas. It makes for the creepiest game in the franchise. Boss rushes are a Mega Man staple that briefly became a Capcom staple. Both Devil May Cry 1 and 3 feature fairly interesting boss rushes to counter Capcom's usual fight all of them in one go methodology. In DMC1 specifically, the final boss fight against Nightmare can potentially transition into a boss rush. Upon being absorbed by Nightmare, Dante will need to fight one of his previous foes. Should players dodge Nightmare's absorption, however, they won't need to actually play through the boss rush. A skilled player can skip out on the full Nightmare completely, only focusing on the main boss himself. Now that's good game design. Compared to other games in the series, the original Devil May Cry stages are incredibly short. Someone who knows what they're doing can comfortably get through the game in 2 hours with little to no struggle, as far as navigation goes. It gives DMC1 a very arcade-like quality, one that encourages replaying the game often. Which makes sense, considering Kamiya would have grown up in an era where arcades would have been his main method of playing video games. It's only natural that such a design philosophy would seep into his game. It also makes Devil May Cry 1 all the better. It has the depth of later entries isolated in small, digestible chunks. On the subject of replaying Devil May Cry, the game isn't quite over when players finish Mundus. Upon clearing normal, hard is unlocked. Enemies are changed, bosses have more attacks, and the game as a whole is much tougher. After beating hard, Dante Must Die is unlocked. It's usually here where dedicated fans drop off. But they shouldn't. Devil May Cry is clearly designed to be played from normal, to hard, to Dante Must Die. In fact, it wouldn't be a stretch to claim that Devil May Cry's normal and hard modes exist specifically to train the player for Dante Must Die. Until Mundus is killed on DMD, the game's not over. Much in the same way fans assume that Leon was the main character of the Resident Evil 4 that became Devil May Cry 1, fans also assume that DMC is a result of Kamiya wanting to focus more on action than survival horror. The fact of the matter is that Resident Evil 4 was always going to be more action-heavy with Kamiya at the helm. This is true for Kamiya's previous regame, Resident Evil 2. A clear survival horror title, yes, but one that amps up the action from the first game exponentially. Tony Redgrave's entire character seems to suggest that Kamiya went into RE4 wanting to make an action game. It really was only a matter of time before Capcom made him change gears. This is quite the grain of salt, but perhaps the most fascinating one in the franchise. Known for their Wii and PS2 ports, Red Fly Studio hasn't had a major release in a few years now, understandably, but a YouTube channel claiming to represent Red Fly Studio posted several proofs of concept videos roughly 3 years ago. Most went ignored, but their most popular video was of a Devil May Cry 1 port for the Nintendo Wii. This game wouldn't have been a straight port, however, and would have reused assets from Devil May Cry 4 in order to make the game look more modern. It's an incredibly interesting project, but one that probably wouldn't have paid off. The Devil May Cry series was created by Hideki Kamiya, who has been involved in a number of Capcom's most iconic series. Currently, Kamiya is with Platinum Games, which he co-founded. As a result, it is no coincidence that some people might find the Bayonetta games to be more than a little bit familiar. It would be an exaggeration to say that the Devil May Cry series was based on the narrative poem called Divine Comedy, but it can't be denied that it has taken inspiration from said source. As for the poem, it has had a profound impact on people's perception of hell, though it is amusing to note that it can be considered a very early example of self-insert fanfiction as well. Much of the focus of the Devil May Cry series lies on stylized combat. In particular, players have strong incentive to pull off the most stylish combos possible, which require not just strings of attacks but also plenty of evades to keep their player characters from taking damage. It is interesting to note that the Devil May Cry series started out as a survival horror project. Eventually, the plans for the first game changed, but there are nonetheless some remaining elements such as exploration and puzzle solving that have managed to make it into the series. With that said, these elements tend to be downplayed because the main focus is on fast-paced action. Combos are ranked using letters in the Devil May Cry series. The rankings start at D for dull, but they move up the alphabet to A before moving on to S eventually. The third Devil May Cry game added both SS and SSS as well, which is a common convention in Japanese pop culture. Generally speaking, the Devil May Cry games feature Dante as the main character, though they have always had other playable characters as well. Background-wise, Dante is supposed to be the son of a demon named Sparta and a human woman named Eva. Unfortunately, since his father was the one who stopped the ruler of the demon world from conquering the human world the last time around, this means that his family is in the crosshairs. Unsurprisingly, Devil May Cry has had a lot of spin-offs. For example, there are light novels. Likewise, there was an anime in the late 2000s, though it wasn't particularly long as these series go. Even the movie rights have been bought out, though so far, there is no sign of a Devil May Cry movie on the horizon. There are a number of terms that can be used to describe the Devil May Cry series. For example, action-adventure is useful for describing the kind of content that interested individuals can expect. Likewise, hack and slash as well as third-person shooter are useful for describing the combat. Technically, the Devil May Cry series can be divided into two series, with the second being a reboot of the first. Unfortunately, the reboot met with something of a mixed response, so much so that it delivered a very hard hit to the chances of seeing a follow-up to it. For proof, consider how the next Devil May Cry game will be a direct sequel to the last installment in the first series, which came out even earlier in 2008. The first Devil May Cry began as one of the earliest incarnations of Resident Evil 4. Hideki Kamiya, now co-founder of Bayonetta developer Platinum Games, became the director of a planned Resident Evil sequel for the PlayStation 2 with his development team, dubbed Team Little Devil, after Resident Evil 2 shipped for the PlayStation in 1998. Kamiya's idea was to make the new entry a more cool and stylish action game with a dynamic camera system, rather than the pre-rendered backgrounds and fixed camera perspectives of past titles. The team even traveled to the United Kingdom and Spain to take pictures of Gothic statues and buildings. Producer Shinji Mikami eventually nixed the idea for straying too far from the survival horror genre, and opted for the project to become its own game. Devil May Cry launched for the PlayStation 2 in 2001, while Resident Evil 4 launched for the Nintendo GameCube on January 11, 2005 with a PlayStation 2 port later that year.